6 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting of the Olive Branch Planning Commission to order. If we'll have the roll call, please.
Pat Dorr,
Here.
Dion Jones,
Here.
Janice Lewis,
Here.
Kimberly Remack, Diane Singer,
Here.
Donnie Singh,
Here.
Steve Stratton.
Okay, you've received in your packet the minutes of the September 10th, 2024 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions needed to the minutes? If not, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Ms. Singer to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second by Mr. Jones. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the minutes have been approved. Our first order of business is an application for a preliminary plat for the Camden Grove subdivision submitted by Greg Russell, Civil Source LLC, on behalf of property owner Michael Burns. The request is to create a subdivision of 30 residential lots and 5 common open spaces from 20.4 plus or minus acres. The subject property is zone R30 and is located on the south side of College Road, just across from Dawkins Farm Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to bring your attention to where we're actually located here. This is College and 305 headed south to College Road, headed west on College Road to approximately the Dawkins Farm Road entrance here. The property is located on the south side of College Road. The entire 20 acres is vacant property. It's currently zoned R30 overlay, and that came to the City of Olive Branch from DeSoto County zoning ordinance, which requires a minimum lot size of 16,000 square feet. Properties annexed into the city would maintain their county zoning designation until rezoned by the Board of Aldermen. Within this community that is proposed, the smallest lot size would be 16,003 square feet. The current plat meets the requirements of the R30 overlay district. The developer proposes new street with one entrance from College Road and no interconnectivity to the southerly Belmore Lakes. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat subject to multiple conditions. So what I have in front of you, Commission, is the same map we were looking at here. This is 305 and headed west on College Road. This is a zoning map that shows you the zoning of the surrounding neighborhoods. As you can see, we have R30 here with Mitchell's Corner. We've got R40 here with Belmore Lakes. We've got a R3 here that was brought over also from the county. We've got an R3 here. If I were to move over here to Payne Parkway and then on to Oakwood Park, you would see another R30. So I wanted to show you this map and that it complements the surrounding areas. As you will notice, I have just put up to the map a picture of the plat with overlaid the a satellite photo here. This will actually work just sort of similar to Mitchell's Corner without the interconnectivity to Belmore Lakes. You've got one entrance with some common open spaces. These common open spaces will need to be worked into the homeowners association rules for maintenance, but you've got common open spaces as you enter the subdivision and a wraparound street to exit. What I've got labeled here is a circle that just pulls out just a general area here within the Dawkins Farm or Gwynn Farms subdivision, and I wanted to show you how these same size lots would look on top of the proposed Camden Grove subdivision. As you notice, these lots here, the houses are properly situated on there. These are about approximately the same size homes as you will see within the Camden Grove subdivision. I do not have any of those home specs with me this afternoon. However, from studying the pre-application meeting notes from the previous meeting, previous to the meeting we had last. They did provide us with some home specs that put the minimum houses around 2,800 square feet. In May of 2021, the subject property, along with Belmore Lake subdivision and other area lands, were annexed into the city of Olive Branch. Per Article 3, Section 3 of the zoning ordinance of the city of Olive Branch, all territory which may hereafter become part of the city of Olive Branch by revision of corporate boundaries shall remain in its existent classification until such time classification may be changed by an amendment to this zoning ordinance as provided by law. So this came over to Olive Branch from DeSoto County in 2021 with the R30 overlay zoning district already applied, and the city has left it that way per Article 3, Section 3 of the zoning ordinance. The property at the time of annexation had a classification of R30 in DeSoto County. The city of Olive Branch has not rezoned the subject property. Therefore, the current zoning of the property is R30 overlay. As you will notice in front of you, this same table is within your packet. This table lays out some different development standards that you would see from R30 compared to Camden Grove. So if you notice, the R30 came over from DeSoto County to the city. The minimum total site area had to be 3 acres. Their minimum site is 20 acres. So as you can see, the requirement is met. So on down through this table here, you can see that the requirements were met. I would like to bring your attention to the usage, because this will be a single-family residential neighborhood, but the R30 does allow for single-family attached and townhomes containing no more than 6 units per building, subject to other provisions. So we are getting houses and not townhouses, and the requirement has been met as these are detached single-family residential homes. You can also see here that the density has been met with R30 requires 2 dwelling units per gross acre. Proposed Camden Grove came under 1.5 at 1.47. So we do have more open space also with this proposed preliminary plat, and the lot size is just a tad bit bigger, but the requirement is met with a 16,310 square foot minimum lot size. Utilities infrastructure provided with gas and sewer along College Road. Lewisburg Water Association has the water for this area. It is important also to note, as some talk has came up with recent plats that have been presented before you, that the 2021 International Fire Code. So this development meets the International Fire Code in that the fire code reads in section D 107.1, 1 or 2 family dwelling unit residential developments. Developments of 1 or 2 family dwellings where the number of dwellings exceeds 30 shall be provided with 2 separate and approved fire apparatuses access roads. So this has 30 units, so 1 road would be appropriate for this preliminary and final plat, hopefully. So our next steps here, this is the plat before you. Again, we see that the requirement was met. 16,000 was the minimum. You see 16,003 here at lot 8, and there's other various lots with 16,000. And you see lots up to 41,700 at lot 18, lot 15, 41,000. So very nice layout here. Our recommendation to the Planning Commission is that the preliminary plat should be recommended for approval, and we would recommend the same to the Board of Aldermen based on the following staff recommendations. 1 through 8, and I would like to bring your attention to recommendation number 6. As number 6 asks that the developer provide an active recreational amenity in common open space 33. So common open space is when you come into the subdivision, and it would be on the east side. We ask that they revise the preliminary plat to name this amenity before we present the preliminary plat to the Board of Aldermen. The other are customary and reasonable within the staff recommendations typically put out for preliminary plats. That will be all for staff's presentation.
Okay, any questions of staff? Everybody okay with it? All right, is there someone here that wishes to represent the application? I do not see anyone here to represent the application. And since this is a plat, we do not have to have a public hearing. So I will address the, to see if we have any comments or discussion or motions by the commissioners.
I'll make a motion. I recommend that we approve this plat, subject to the following 10 staff recommendations.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Remack to approve this application, subject to the staff, 10 staff conditions. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Lewis. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the motion carries and the application is approved. Application number 2 is an application for the second revision of the Goodman Crossroads subdivision to divide Lot 1, 1.779 plus or minus acres into lots 1A and 1B, submitted by Mike Davis, the Reeves firm, on behalf of Michael Rozier, member of RM Olive Branch LLC. The subject property is zoned C2 Highway Commercial District and is located at the western end of Old Goodman Road East on the south side of Highway 302.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commissioners, before you is a request to consider a final plat for the second revision of the Goodman Road subdivision, as you did mention. This is Goodman Road East. You have Walmart at this area, Chick-fil-A. If you come up on Craft, Goodman Road frontage, come up to this intersection along Highway 302. If you cross the highway coming to City Hall, that location will be just to your left, directly opposite the City Park, and Pet Suite is at this location. Not too long ago, after this was initially platted, the property owner came in, replatted this particular site, creating these 3 lots. Lot 2 has been approved for an auto dealership, but is not yet been developed. Lot 3 currently has the Pet Suite on it. The subject property for consideration tonight is Lot 1, which is 1.78 acres. So this is an existing lot. The applicant proposes to subdivide this Lot 1 or to replat it into 2 lots, 1A and 1B. 1A will be 1.515 acres, and Lot 1B will be just about 0.63 acres. There is a TVA easement that will traverse the both proposed lots to the west. However, the lot will still have sufficient buildable area outside of that 100 feet wide easement. The plat before you for consideration tonight does not show a cross-access easement providing access to Lot 1B to the north. So this Lot 1A, as it is now, does not have access from Highway 302, from Craft Goodman Road frontage, or Goodman Road East directly. Its access comes through this private easement that is currently dedicated on the plat. Splitting this Lot 1 to create this Lot 1B will create a situation where this cross-access easement does not touch Lot 1B. So the subdivider needs to provide this cross-access easement through Lot 1A to Lot 1B in order to ensure that the proposed Lot 1B has access through that easement onto public streets. This is the plat as proposed. It generally meets the zoning regulations of the city. The property is zone C2. There is no minimum lot size requirement in the C2 Of course, you have the standard setback requirements, 50 feet in the front, no side, 20 feet in the rear. Those will apply when the subdivision or when we receive a site plan for any specific development on the property. None has been proposed at this time. These lines are essentially utility easements. So when we look at it, you have a buildable area here outside of the easements. You have another buildable area here outside of those utility easements. Staff recommends approval of this plat subject to a number of conditions, 1 to 6, which are pretty standard. Some of them are clerical, others are just about cleaning up a number of things on the plat, especially the need to provide that ingress egress easement through lot 1 to lot 1 through lot 1A to lot 1B, as I did mention. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of staff? No questions, then is there someone here to represent the application?
Good evening, I'm Mike Davis with the Reeves Firm, 6800 Poplar Avenue. And the only thing I'll add is this is, it's being subdivided because the developer is dealing with 2 different restaurant entities and would like to get both of them on the site. And their site plans fit the lots.
Okay.
Be glad to answer any questions.
I guess you're okay with the easements and everything, the way they're drawn up?
Sure.
No further questions, then thank you.
Thank you.
I will open this for public hearing. Is anyone here that wishes to speak in favor or against this application? If there's no one, so the public hearing is closed. I will now entertain motions or discussions from the commissioners on this item.
I make a motion to approve the application subject to the 6 conditions that were listed.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Remack to approve this application subject to the staff conditions. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Singer. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the motion carries and the application is approved. Thank you. Then I guess one other item of business is to review the ordinance to require conditional use permits, convenience stores with fuel pumps. Do y'all wish to?
Yes, sir. You received in your packet a proposed ordinance for discussion tonight, but not a voting action. So the goal for tonight is for staff to kind of give a general presentation on what this ordinance is all about, receive any comments that you may have, incorporate those comments on any changes that you may want to see into the text, and then bring it back to you at your next meeting for a public hearing. So the public hearing on this will actually be, I mean, you can receive comments tonight from members of the public. Some of them will own properties that were notified, especially those with PDs, because this is going to affect PDs. And then at your next meeting, you can look at the text as proposed, any comments you have that might have been incorporated into the new regulations, and if you're comfortable with it, then you can make the recommendation to the Board of Aldermen for the decision action. So again, tonight is just general presentation from staff and then discussion from the board, any input that you may have for the board, for staff to take into consideration. So to kind of give you a background of how we got here, where are we? Prior to November 2022, convenience stores with fuel pumps in the city were permitted by right. In other words, they were permitted uses in the C1, C2, C3, M1, and M2 districts. So those are the conventional commercial and industrial districts. They are not a planned district. They were permitted by right in those particular areas, in those particular zoning districts. In planned districts such as C4, that's planned commercial district, M3, planned industrial or manufacturing district, And in the PUDs, they were permitted or prohibited as specified in the project text. For example, if you take Trinity Park, there is a gas station that is currently under construction at the intersection of Church and 305. That was permitted in the project text by right. If you take the one that is under construction in Fox Creek subdivision, that was permitted in the project text as a conditional use for that particular subdivision approved in the county. That project text was approved in the county. And then when the city annexed that property, they had to go through the city to get a conditional use permit approved for it. So PDs were basically addressed as approved in the project text. In November of 2022, the city revised the zoning ordinance, basically making convenience stores with fuel pumps conditional uses in those conventional commercial and industrial zoning districts. In the plant development district, that ordinance, the code amendment ordinance, basically stated that they would be as approved in the project text. The conditional uses criteria that were added as far as these conditional uses are concerned. So you had what you can call two objective criteria, the ones that if you stand out there, you can see them very clearly. Those two main ones were that the convenience store with fuel pumps and truck had to be at a signalized intersection. You had to have, at a four-way intersection, only two were allowed. At a T intersection, only one, as if the conditional use permit was approved. And then the applicant had to meet all the other conditional use permit criteria that are applicable to any other conditional use permit. It's worth to stress this because sometimes there is a confusion or there is a thought that the code said if you are at a signalized intersection and there are no more than two, you're automatically approved. That's not what those regulations said. You had to meet all the other criteria for the conditional use permit, such as neighborhood character, no impact on the negative impact on the neighborhood character, public safety, whether vehicular hazard, environmental impact, impact on property values, all of those had to be taken into consideration. Why did we make this particular change in 2024? Because of two main reasons. The first was to address traffic concerns. When you have convenience stores with fuel pumps, folks go in and out. There is this quick in, out, in, out. And when you locate the mid-block, they tend to interrupt traffic significantly because you have quick access to the site and exit. So it was important to put them at the intersection so that anybody exiting from the site could get to the stoplight, as opposed to interrupting traffic midway too frequently, in mid-block too frequently. The second element, and this is an important element that is sometimes overlooked, had to do with concern for health, which is why you had only two, because the question arises, why only two, why not three, why not four? Or why not just say only one, why not five? The element about the two at a four-way stop or just one at a T-way stop wasn't just about the traffic pattern, but also concerns for health. Multiple studies have shown that a key element in gas, in fuel, that has a health impact is benzene. It's a significant cause of cancer, especially for children. And studies have shown that when you concentrate, when you cluster gas station, benzene concentration in the air increases significantly. So to limit that concentration and keep the health of our community, promote the health of community residents, it was important to limit them. For example, this is from one study that was conducted. In this case, if you look at this blue area, you had one gas station, you measure the BTX complex that has the benzene, the distance is pretty small. The moment you go to two, your distance, how concentrated it is, increases. If you go to 3, it increases. You go to 4. So if you have all the 4 corners with gas stations, your benzene concentration increases significantly. So those were some of the considerations that were taken, some of the factors that were taken into consideration in limiting the number of gas stations at these locations. A number of factors, however, were not taken, a number of issues were not addressed back in 2022. which since then have come to the attention of staff, the mayor, and other city officials. Namely, while we address the health concern from the perspective of the concentration of these dangerous chemicals on human health, the issue of how far they need to be from residents, playground for kids, in order to protect the health of citizens or residents of the city was not taken into consideration. It was not addressed. So these particular regulations seek to address, or to at least begin to address, that particular issue. Secondly, we just had regulations that said convenience store with fuel pumps. It didn't take into consideration the differences in the scale or in the nature of the development. So the convenience store with fuel pumps, with 8 pumps, for example, is totally different in impact from one that has 20 fuel pumps. You know, just from a traffic perspective, all that difference was not taken into consideration. You have recently, we've seen situations where in 2022, we basically just addressed convenience store with fuel pumps and truck stop. Well, what of instances where you have trucks fueling, but not actually truck packing, and overnight with showers like you have a Flying J? You know, that's another difference that was not taken into consideration. Crime concerns have also been raised, and we've had a time to do some studies in the city, gather some data on, not just focus on what is FBI data, you know, generally in the country in terms of crime rate at these gas stations. We've had the opportunity to gather some data in the city and see really there is a significant difference between crime at convenience stores and the ones that you have on truck stops like Flying J. You know, those are the crime rate, and the types of crime are kind of different. We need to take those differences into consideration. What about aesthetics and design elements as far as the corridor, the driving corridor, especially if we're going to allow them basically at intersections? Those intersections become the keynotes, you know, in the city. So you go from, if you drive along the corridor, your intersections where you stop are really your keynotes, the attraction points. And what about the aesthetics of those corridors? It's necessary to take that into consideration. That was not addressed. Environmental concerns and the community character as a whole was also not addressed in terms of where we site and how we site this particular location. This is an example. Everybody familiar with the city may know this one. Planning Commissioner Donna Singh is doing a development not far from this location on Highway 78. So this is an old gas station that, you know, shut down, and nobody can do anything about, or nobody has done anything about it. It's an eyesore out there. It's a blighted location in the city. And I get a question all the time, why has nobody gone there? Why is it that folks are developing on other lots, but nobody doing anything here? I said, well, ask Planning Commissioner Donna Singh. He'll give you an answer. The cost to develop, to clean up this site, when you have gas tanks on the ground and they get shut down, the cost to clean up the site to meet APA rules and develop that site, you can as well go and buy a 50-acre piece of property and build a giant, I don't know, warehouse. So, there you go. It's more expensive to take it out than to put it in. So we have to, as a city, we've got to think about the future. If you have too many of these situations in the city, what are we going to end up with? Those intersections and so on basically end up as blighted as this. So we have to think about a community character. How are we going to design these gas stations and locate them in such a way that we can minimize this sort of impact on our community? Also, the element of PDs. One thing that characterizes zoning in Olive Branch historically is PDs. We have developed too many properties in the city have been developed based as planned developments, whether a single lot or 10 lots, 20 lots. Every PD is a PD. It's a planned development. And sometimes you look at it and say, why was this not just a standard C2 zoning district and you could handle it, the rest of the infrastructure through a preliminary plan? So we got a lot of planned developments in the city. And when we are doing these code updates, addressing PD is always, this planned development, it's always tricky. It's always tricky. For example, in 2022, when the city revised or amended the zoning ordinance and made convenience store with fuel pumps conditional uses. Well, that applied to just the conventional zoning districts. To make sure that what we are addressing in the conventional zoning districts is also addressed in the PDs, in other words, to bring every commercial property in the city to the standard that the city really desires, we basically have to go back and amend each of those PDs. You have to amend each of them because they are zoning, they are very specific to each piece of property. We have to do that. That was not done in 2022. The last thing, and I put this in bold, in 2022, we also did not address projects that were at various permitting stages. What does this mean? I'll give you an example. We got a lot of complaints, calls and complaints. If you look at the convenience store that is under construction at the intersection of Old Goodman and Highway 302, right here. It's not at a signalized intersection. And residents who know about these rules that were adopted in 2022 raised the question. In 2022, the city said you only have gas stations and signalized intersection. How comes we are having a gas station here when the intersection is not signalized? Somebody apparently is not enforcing the rules. So goes the thought. But before those regulations were approved, that gas station had already been approved. And so it had to go ahead. You couldn't stop it. Those projects that were already in the pipeline were not addressed. They can stay out there for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And what we are trying to achieve will never be achieved with them unless we do something to make sure that they get done in time so that any new developments coming in can catch up with the new conditions that we want to see in the city. So those projects, as I did mention, were not addressed. We want to take care of them in these particular regulations. In this regard, the regulations before you are far more comprehensive than what was done in 2022. What are the policy changes or policy proposals to address this particular issue? The first focus has to do with this distinction that I mentioned between convenience stores of different scale. So, the proposal before you is to look at them from 3 categories. Convenience stores with fuel pumps up to 8 fuel pumps. So you basically have 16 fueling spots, if you consider that each island has got 2 pumps on both sides. So that's one category. Those will be permitted as a conditional use. So going forward, everything is conditional use. In the C1, that's neighborhood commercial, C2 highway commercial, C3 general commercial. Currently, they're also permitted in the C5. C5 is your Old Town. And if you look at the rest of the property that is in Old Town and the way Old Town is really laid, it will not be in the best interest of the city and the character of that area to be allowing gas stations in Old Town. The way the streets are, you really don't have sidewalks. Going in and out of property is pretty difficult. It will pose significant problems. And then in the manufacturing districts, M1, M2, and the planned developments. So we are maintaining, the proposal is to maintain the signalized intersection requirement, the only 2 at 4-way intersection, only 1 at a T intersection, and continue to require that these be conditional use permits. For convenience stores with more than 8 pumps and no more than 4 tractor-trailer fueling stations, those will only be permitted in the C2, C3, M1, and M2 districts. They will not be permitted in the C1. So if you're fueling trucks, you cannot be in the neighborhood commercial district. That is basically, most of them kind of adjoin single-family residential areas, those C1 districts. You really will not be permitted there. For truck stops, where you actually have trucks parking there, you have showers, like Flying J. So truck stop, think about Flying J. That is an example par excellence of a truck stop in the city. It's Flying J. So you also need to be at a signalized, if that were proposed, it would have to be at a signalized intersection, no more than 2, If it's four-way intersection, no more than one at a T intersection, that will also require a conditional use permit. In the regulations that were sent to you for consideration, there was a proposal to eliminate truck stops in the C2 district. An option that has been brought to the table, back to the table for consideration, is to permit them in the C2 district subject to conditional use permit, basically like all other development. The reason we had considered eliminating them from C2 district is when you look at the zoning map of the city, most C2 zoning districts are not far from single-family residential. They either adjoin it, they are very close to single-family residential areas. Most adjoin single-family residential development. And so permitting truck stops in those areas adjoining single-family, we thought really would not align with character of the area. However, if they are subject to conditional use permit, then you can as well use that criteria of the character of the area in making a determination whether to permit or not to permit if in a C2 district if an application were made. In terms of planned developments, this was not addressed in 2022. The regulations just basically said as approved in the project text. What these regulations propose is going forward and following a kind of a precedence. We've had a precedence on this. When Oak Park Town Center, I hope I finally pronounced that correctly, Oak Park Town Center, okay, thank you. That is east of Hacks Cross Road, south of Highway 302, so just south of Woods Boulevard, around that particular area. When that particular PD was proposed, the developer suggested having a convenience store with fuel pumps at what would be the south corner of the intersection of Woods Boulevard and Highway 302 in that PD. And it was approved, subject to conditional use permit, subject to there being a traffic light at that intersection. So you don't have any gas station there now because there's no traffic light, and you don't have any gas station there because there is no conditional use permit granted for it. So that is already being done as far as PDs are concerned. And we think that we can just go ahead and codify that particular requirement, basically. The second significant change will concern how far these particular uses need to be from residential areas, how far you need to have the gas station from of the different categories. Now, the separation distance, I should specify how you measure it. The minimum separation distance to any residentially zoned property, daycare, school, public park, or public playground, this is measured from the closest building wall of the convenience store or truck stop or fuel canopy to the property line of the protected property. For already approved PDs, this star basically implies that the distance requirement, they are exempted from that distance requirement for already approved PDs that are in the books. So convenience store with fuel pumps for passenger vehicles limited to 8 to 16 fueling positions. The minimum lot size will have to be 1 acre. Currently, we don't have any minimum lot size for them. No minimum separation distance. The proposal is to have the minimum 200 feet separation distance. They do not have to be on a truck route. So that's usually the ones that you have close to single-family residential neighborhood areas. The ones that are 8 pumps to 16, and you have no more than 4 tractor trailer parking spaces. Classic example of this was the racetrack that was proposed. That is the way it was. The minimum lot size, 2 acres, separation distance from residential, schools, daycares, public park, playgrounds, 400 feet. You have to be on a truck route because it involves truck fueling. And then your classical truck stop, minimum 4 acre lot size, 600 feet, and separation distance, and you also have to be on a truck route. There are studies that kind of show one of the things that you have from the, with respect to this separation distance, I think I already mentioned that, has to do with the impact, the concentration of chemicals that are produced on this particular site, ensuring that some of these locations like truck stops are significantly separated from residential areas where some crime that are sometimes tend to be even adult oriented, to protect property values, protect kids and so on, they need to be far away from these locations. With respect to design elements, the fuel canopy would be required to use the same exterior material and architectural style as the principal building. This is common. It's very common. Majority gas stations in the city, this is what they do. There are very few where you don't have this design element. Each column or pier shall have a minimum 8 feet high base of brick or natural stone. Most are designed like this, almost 95% of the ones we have in the city. There are very few that I've seen that do not have this design. The canopy would be required to be at the side or rear, not in the front of the building. The BZA may waive this in the approval of the conditional use permit if there are traffic safety issues, or it would put the canopy very close to a residential at the rear. So let me explain this. Currently, this is what you have for most gas stations in the city. At an intersection, you've got a building, and then you have the canopy in the front facing the street. So the canopy basically defines the character of that particular lot as you're driving down the road. That canopy defines that intersection. That canopy defines, visibility in that particular area, that particular node. What the regulations basically do is flip it and say, no, instead of the canopy being a defining feature, you want your building, the architecture, the building itself, the beauty of the structure, the principal structure, to be the defining element. As such, just as you have other buildings along that corridor, as such, the policy proposer basically says the building, the canopy, should not project. You cannot put the canopy in the front of the building. You can put it on the side where it doesn't project. So this is your property line. Take this to be your property line, and this is the intersection. The canopy cannot project or be closer to the road than your front building line. If you put it at the back, so this is in a side location scenario, you can locate it at the rear. At this rear, you can either put it like this, move it this way, or bring it closer to this other street. But if you bring it closer to this other street, it cannot project closer to the street than the building itself. Basically, that's what that regulation is all about. Furthermore, the freestanding sign currently will require, as a matter of policy, basically every freestanding sign in the city to be maximum 12 feet high monument style, instead of having the single pole 40 feet high signs that just destroy the beauty of driving corridors in the city. And then for tractor trailer parking areas, for truck stop, the parking area for the tractor trailer, as a matter of safety, will be required to have 8 feet high, minimum 8 feet high composite fence around them, and you need to have a minimum type 50 buffer as provided in the design review ordinance. What that means is you have to have minimum 50 feet wide separation, landscape areas separating that truck parking area from any residential property that may be adjoining. If you're up to, I wonder, because if you have to be 600 feet from the residential, that comes into play. And then in the type 50 buffer scenario, you also have to fortify that buffer with a fence, and not just only trees planted in there. Now, whenever you adopt new regulations, one thing that comes into play is what happens to the gas stations or the convenience stores, the truck stops that are already existing, that are out there. How will this affect them? Will we require that they be demolished and rebuilt to meet these new codes? Would I be going out tomorrow and asking Adam, Planning Commissioner Don Singh and all the other folks that own gas stations in the city and say, hey, all your gas stations need to go down? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So for existing C-stores with fuel pumps and truck stops, anything that is existing, the existing conditions will remain unaffected. There's nothing we can do about them. They were built under the codes that were permitted at the time. They receive a certificate of occupancy from the city. You cannot penalize them. So their existing conditions will remain unaffected. If they are conforming with these regulations, then they will be considered conforming. If they are not, they will simply be considered legal non-conforming. What that means is they are legal because they were built legally. They are just non-conforming from the perspective of the new rules. They do not align with the new rules. But they are legal. You cannot stop the operation. Like every other legal non-conforming use in the city, every other legal non-conforming use, if you want to expand, then you have to meet the new rules. Whatever you're expanding, whatever you're adding, has to meet the new rules, or except in this particular case, and this is even, you can call it a concession, something that doesn't really apply in most other uses in the city, that unless the vesting provisions have been met. Now, all other uses in the city don't have these unless vesting provisions have been met provision. They don't have that. So, precisely because there are no generic vesting provisions in the zoning ordinance for all other uses. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody has a single family, you have not an office will not be the best use. Let's say you have a retail, Dollar General, for example, on a piece of property in the city today, and then the city changes the rules and zones that property residential. So it's no longer permitted from a zoning perspective to have a commercial use as a Dollar General on that piece of property. That Dollar General will continue to exist as a legal non-conforming use. If you tear it down and you leave it under current rules, if you tear down that Dollar General and you do not reconstruct for 12 months, no activity goes on there for 12 months, then your right to rebuild it as a Dollar General is done. What you call grandfather. You lost your grandfather privileges. So legal non-conforming is basically what we traditionally call grandfather. You will lose those privileges. For you to redevelop the site, it will have to be a residential development in line with the new code. So that is what this particular provision means. What about the projects that are in various permitting and construction phases? For example, you have plans that are currently under review. We're currently reviewing site plans for about 6 different convenience stores in the city. I think 6. About 7, I think, are under construction. Others have received permits but have not yet been constructed. Others have received building permits. The building permits have expired. Those building permits have not been renewed. What happens to them? They're in various stages of construction. They are not yet legal non-conforming in the sense that they exist already on the site. So they are just in the review process. And they have been designed based on the current code. It would be unfair for us to go back and tell all of them, go back and redesign the entire project. There is need to give them some time, for those projects to be materialized. If they are not materialized within that time, then they lost their vesting rights. And then to do them again, you have to go through a conditional use permit, basically meet the new requirements. So this is all about giving those projects some time, so to speak. So to vest a project from the requirement for a conditional use permit and your design and locational criteria, a couple of elements are proposed. So, 1, the project will need to have received preliminary plat approval and record the final plat by March 31st, 2025. So that is basically about 6-7 months from today. If you do it in October, that is about 4 months. Preliminary and final plat. So this is about platting. Preliminary and final plat. Receive approval of civil, landscaping, site lighting, and building elevation plans by that March 31st, 2025. Obtain your building permit by December 31st, 2025. So you got 1 year. If these were approved, you have 1 year to get your building permits approved. And then, to get a project completed and get your certificate of occupancy, you have 2 years. So that is by December 31st, 2026. And projects with expired building permits. We have projects in the city that the building permits have expired. Some of them, they have not received any, they have not passed any inspection for the past 6 months. They are basically in a kind of quasi-abandoned stage. And they are out there, they're an eyesore in the city. I cannot count how many hours I have personally put into chasing folks down to clean up those sites. I say this very emphatically, it's not correct. You know, you have the wind blowing all those things onto public streets. On Saturdays, I've had to come out and go park my private car beside the street and go pick up garbage blown from these sites that are kind of quasi-abandoned, and we need to do something about them. They are a code enforcement nightmare. Projects with expired building permits, no building inspection that have been passed within the past 6 months, to renew those building permits, the fees would be doubled. So that is the criteria that we have, or the conditions that you have for those vesting provisions. The approval process, there will basically be 2 ordinances. One, adopting these particular regulations, or incorporating any comments that the Planning Commission may have. And you also have another ordinance that will amend the PDs, as I did mention, the Plan Development Project text, that allowed gas stations by right or as conditional uses to incorporate these new regulations. So you basically have another ordinance that will name these PDs, these plan developments, and say something to the effect of the provisions of the city zoning ordinance, chapter this, article this are hereby adopted and incorporated into this project text, basically. So you have those 2 ordinances. One thing, and this had some have been raised by one of the planning commissioners, had to do with when you adopt regulations of this nature. Certainly, there is no doubt about this. These are kind of more restrictive than what we currently have, like distance separation. You didn't have that. Are we creating a situation where the element of convenience is lost? Because if you call something a convenience store, and then if you become too restrictive, you're losing that element of convenience in the city. The key thing about convenience is proximity. You know, folks want it close to wherever they work or wherever they live. You can just drive out there within a short distance, grab a gallon of milk, or pick up kind of drinks, whatever folks buy at convenience store. Are we losing that element by having these restrictions? This map answers that question. I'm glad this got included a key here. So currently in the city, we have 6 C-stores under construction. We have 1 with civil site plans approved, but no construction started yet. We have 5 with civil site plans under review. We have 2 with construction plans not started, but the building permits were approved and they have expired. And we have 31 that are existing. So we have 31 existing gas stations in the city. If you add all of these, they come out to about 45. If you take those on the map, your kind of green area here, that is a quarter-mile radius of where you have each of these, or will have each of these. They all materialize. Your area there in kind of that pinkish color, that is a half-mile radius. And your kind of a pink color out there, that is the 1 mile buffer. If you follow this map, what this really means is basically everybody in the city of Olive Branch, except in very few areas, such as over here in the northwestern part of the city, in the center heat area, far northeastern area of the city, and also down here, newly annexed area that have not really been developed. Everybody basically lives within a mile of a gas station. 98% of the city of Olive Branch, you can say, lives within a mile of an existing gas station or a gas station that has been approved for construction, has a building permit, is under construction, has plans under review. So the convenience element, so to speak, is not lost. It's not lost. New ones would only just be adding to what we already have in the system. That concludes staff's presentation. So I am available to take down any comments that you may have. This is now open for discussion. And I think the members of the public, if the chairman opens it up, you can receive comments. I can make any clarifications if folks have questions. and then the board can have a discussion and give me some direction. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any discussion, any questions?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions and some clarification that I was just wanting from staff. So in the map that we have in our packet,
Mr.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to listen first from the public before you have the discussion on the board, or how do you want to do this?
I thought we'd have the board discussion first, and then if the public wishes to make some comments,
Okay.
we'll do that.
Thank
I understand the formal hearing will be at the
Next month.
next month meeting
Yes.
anyway.
So the board is going to discuss, and then the board will also hear from you. Thank you.
the map that we have in our packets that was given to us, the sites that are marked with the yellow and black, it's a black star with the yellow circle around it. I'm guessing the majority of those sites are all PDs, where they're
Let me get to the map, sir.
those are
Just give me a second.
allowed.
All right, the site that are marked, yes,
So-
those are all PDs.
Mostly those are all PDs, right? Or yeah, they are
All of
PDs.
them.
All of them
Anything
are.
marked with that black star with a yellow ring
Yeah.
around it, that's a P, that's a plan development.
So those would all fall under the vested provision, where it's, you've got until March 2025 to get your plan submitted, and then after that time, it's all conditional use.
Yes, if you meet the vesting provisions, you'll be good.
Okay.
If you do not meet the vesting provisions, then after that deadline, you will have to go through the
You're
conditional
gonna have to go
use.
with the new requirements and
Yes, sir.
stuff. Okay, gotcha. That was my biggest question there on that one. On the for the distances on the chart, so it's my understanding, we're basically breaking gas stations down into 3 different categories, right? We've got small gas stations, travel centers, I guess we can call them, and then full-on truck stops.
Small,
right?
medium, large.
Small, medium, large, right? Yeah. And I see we're basically breaking them down by MPDs, by the pumps, the pump count, you know. A gas station with 8 pumps is still it should be a very active site. There should be a lot of traffic coming in and out of 8 pumps. Majority of stores these days, especially ones that are gonna be closer to that C1 district, or not in the C1 district, that are closer to residences, especially within 200 feet of residences, that's still a lot of traffic coming into those areas. So if we could consider the pump count from 8 to 6, I think, because 6 is a sufficient amount, you know, if you build a store within 200 feet of a residence, I think 6 pumps is sufficient enough to pump enough volume to where the economics still work on it. And then so that was the first thing on the pump count there. The distances, I remember when we were dealing with the racetrack thing, the distance between racetrack's building and the closest place was 600 feet. And it was also 600 feet. Jason showed an example of 600 feet between the store that I developed at Pleasant Hill and Margaret Manor, those homes. If you use that in context and you think of a truck stop being 600 feet within that distance to a residence, that seems kind of short for a full-on truck stop. So just keeping that in mind, I thought, you know, maybe bumping the restrictions for at least for the truck stops at the bare minimum from 600 to maybe 1,000 would be a little better. Size-wise, those are good. Oh, on the canopy signs, we were limiting those to just 1 sign on the canopy per site, right?
Yes, sir.
So usually stronger brands like Exxon, Shell, those guys, they have requirements for 2. And now we can, but they actually have requirements that they say your signs have to be placed on opposite ends of the canopy. So like one has to be facing this direction, one has to be facing the other direction. So that prevents signage from being clustered in together and everything like that. And this is kind of just from a developer standpoint, it would make it a little bit difficult for us to get sites approved by them if we could only have 1 sign on canopies. At minimum, they require 2. So.
Sorry, if I understand you, I'm going to comment on
Sure.
the other points that you raised. So if you had a canopy at an intersection,
Yeah.
and each of the sides of the canopy that is facing the street.
Okay.
So let me take this. Let
So
me
like
use this example.
facing the front street and then the side
front
street.
street.
Yeah.
So if
yeah.
you look at what you have in front of you, So if you had a sign here, one sign, and one sign here, would that, is that
Yeah,
sufficient?
that's actually how they require it.
Okay.
From a branding standpoint.
Okay,
So,
I think we will, that is what was intended, maybe we
Okay.
just didn't write that clearly. You will be able to have that for county, because I think it's important, if you have, let's take a scenario like, you know, I don't know whether that will still be necessary. Well,
mhm,
we would, because if you
Sure.
have something like this, and then you have another building here,
yeah,
and you're putting a sign here, I wonder what use that sign is really for, because, you know, folks are only seeing it
yeah,
from the road.
yeah.
And if
yeah.
you had another one here, and folks are coming down this way, you know, that's the only sign that adjoins the street, that is
Yeah.
visible from the public street. So we will address that.
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, 90% of our attraction is from the street, the ground mount sign with the price on it. That's really what we use to identify the stores. But I mean, that's the canopy signage is just really something we have to do to satisfy brands, you know, and they have their own brand requirements of like, hey, we have to do this, this, and this in order for that to happen. Now, weaker brands, and I say weaker as in like second tier brands, they don't have restrictive sign guidelines, and I mean, so that it would just be a shame that because of the signage guidelines, we would start seeing more second-tier brands instead of better quality brands that have more strict brand requirements like Shell and Exxon and whatnot. Like those guys actually pay attention to, you know, how clean your site is and everything like that, whereas the other guys typically don't. But yeah, that's just something that I thought about. And then the MPD count, the canopy placement. Now that you have this open. I know this is kind of like a contentious thing, like where do we put the canopy, but, and I think it's good that we have that in there, that the BZA can waive that, or the Board of Aldermen can waive that, so that way we're not putting a canopy in front of somebody's house, basically, you know, is the intent there, but the intent to put them behind the building and on the side of the building is really to encourage development of the entire site there. Like if you've got 15 to 20 acres, you know, of a commercial development, and the first the first corner gets developed, and then you've got 18 acres just sitting there for the next 20 years. It kind of is a little bit of an eyesore, but it incentivizes the development of the rest of that part of the package. So that's I'm good with that. So, but yeah, that's everything I have.
Yeah, now, sort of adding on to the canopy at the rear. With the canopy at the rear, near residential, you've got, you know, you're gonna have additional lighting that is maybe in somebody's backyard. Even though it's 200 feet, that light is now there, where if the building is the closest to the residence, there's not typically a whole lot of lighting. So you've got the lighting. Security is more of an issue if a canopy is not on the roadway. If a canopy is on the roadway, you get more drive-by traffic. And from a security perspective, you're balancing it. You've got easier ingress and egress for thieves, so that raises your security threshold. But also, in-store issues, in-store incidents are reduced if the canopy's on the front, because that's where more of the traffic is, that's where more people are. And so you're not really solving security by moving the canopy in the back. And then I would just say, by moving the canopy in the back, if there's other buildings to my right, and they're set back, and they've got a parking area, and now I've got to put my building in front of them, I don't know if we're sort of messing up the conformity of additional development down that same road.
But good.
My thoughts.
Does the board want me to just take all of these, or should we discuss each of them as we go along? Maybe let me kind of begin with the comment that Planning Commissioner Donna Singh had with respect to reducing the number of pumps. If you look at this, if you look at this slide, This has at most 8 pumps in the C1, C2, C3, M1, M2 districts. Maybe 8 pumps is okay in the C1, C3, manufacturing M1, M2, but not okay in the C1. I took note when you mentioned that this is close to your residential. The county, because I've looked at a couple of other regulations around here, I had an opportunity to look at one of them today. And the county's new regulations will basically limit it, if you're in the neighborhood commercial district, which is RC1, they are limiting it to 4. So that's rural area. If you take, we are more urbanized than they are. Maybe kind of a compromise position, if you look at it that way, will be to say no more than 6 in the C1. Yeah. Then for C2, C3, M1, and M2, and then your plan district, you can have them up to 8.
Well, you might as well combine those two. Because if C1's the only different, even the only all of the requirements, all the provisions are the same. Maintain signalized requirement, maximum of 2 at 4-way intersection, maximum of 1 at T required. All of the requirements are the same.
You just have different categories permitted in different districts.
Right, so C1 is really the only, C1 is the only difference.
And plan developments. For example, your
C1 and plan development.
And plan developments, yes. You will not have the plan developments in the more than 8 and 4 tractor trailers, they are not permitted. You will not have that in your plan development districts.
So C1 and plan development, but then C2, C3, M1, M2.
They are basically generally the same.
Yeah.
So we can look at separating C1 and your plan development scenario and limiting that to 6. And then increasing the truck distance, increasing the distance for trucks. This is an important thing for the Planning Commission to really think about and discuss and make a recommendation on this, I would say. I looked at what many other areas in the country have. You know, separation distances really became something that was advocated by many cities after a certain study that came up from California, where they basically measured, if you go from the pump, and how far does gas, are you still able to detect gas? How far does it go, measuring from the pump? It went right up to about 256, 294 feet. And that's where most cities adopted a 300 feet requirement. Mm-hmm. Since then, there has been some other studies that instead of measuring from the pump, have measured from the pipe, the exhaust pipe. And they were able to detect that 500 feet. So you've got more, especially if it malfunctions. If it malfunctions, the distance is more. So that kind of pushed certain jurisdictions to start going up to 500 feet, minimum requirement. Whether it's just the 6 pumps or 8 pumps, it was pushed to that. And then the 1,000 feet requirement that some other jurisdictions have really comes from the EPA guidelines on the siting of schools. Cautions municipalities in the location of schools within 1,000 feet of a gas station that dispenses up to and above 3.6 million gallons a year. And so, that's like your Kurtco, your bigger guys, and the truck stop. Once you start dealing with dispensing gasoline and you add to your ordinary vehicle fueling, it's very easy to hit that 3.6 million, quite easily. That's what pushed municipalities to adopt that 1,000 feet distance. So, I say that to say, that's something you need to take into consideration as you have this discussion. Most of the times when we've had meetings in here and I've had neighborhood speak, you did mention the racetrack scenario. I think it's really a matter of, and even how the board made that decision, how far do you want to permit this from residential? Schools is important because you have got playground for kids out there. They are the most vulnerable when it comes to benzene. No kidding. They are the most vulnerable. You've got a daycare. So little kids, they got playgrounds, public parks, these are playground, outdoor areas. And then in suburban areas, you have houses with very large yards. Those yards are basically playgrounds. So how do you protect human health, and which is very important? That's not the purpose of zoning. Protection of, the safety, health, and general convenience, general public welfare. That's the purpose of zoning. That's the key things that zoning is all intended to be. How do we protect public health, safety, general welfare? So you can take that into consideration in how you recommend on this. I leave it up to you. What do you want to see? I will take that back on advisement and have staff look at it.
I can give you an example of a municipality very close to us. I mean, in Collierville, it's 1,000 feet, not just for truck stop, for any gas station that's under development. It has to be 1,000 feet from residential, schools and everything like that. We actually just ran into that in a site there, and they said it's 1,000 feet no matter what. And I mean, I feel like that's a very aggressive stance, even to say if, somebody's gonna put a gas station with 2 pumps or 3 pumps in it, and it has to be 1,000 feet from a residence, that's a little, I felt that was a little tough, but I think Germantown's is about 500 as well within their conditional use permit application. So, I mean, municipalities around us are fairly aggressive with these. So it wouldn't just be something that, oh, well, Olive Branch is the only municipality that does that. I mean, we would be falling in line with basically what everybody around us is doing as well. So,
Can you go back to the sort of the heat map of the gas stations?
The heat map?
Yeah. Not the Benz, yeah, that one. So, without digging into, all right, what are the potential, one of the things when you start restricting gas stations, you've got to switch to a focus on walkability within your city. And then the second one is, will these restrictions impact other demographics within the community if they don't have the same access as the existing demographics? So I don't know if 1,000 feet would negatively impact those undeveloped or underdeveloped locations.
If you had 1,000 feet for truck stop.
Truck stops.
For truck stop.
No. That's not a convenience store. I'm just talking about from a convenience factor within the city of Olive Branch. You can see we're pretty saturated within a mile. But currently, those underdeveloped or that don't have the gas station on their corner within a mile, would extending that out 1,000 feet, would extending out just a convenience store with the 4 pumps, would that negatively impact the ability for the people who don't have those gas stations? Probably don't want them, but it only takes one person to say, you disallowed a gas station in my neighborhood because of your regulations, and so I've been disproportionately affected. So without knowing what 1,000 feet would do,
the areas that are not covered by this heat map, like these clear areas, I bet you there is hardly any intersection there with a traffic light that is not within 1,000 feet of the house. There is hardly, if you come to this is your 302 and Center Hill. That is about the last traffic light intersection that you have in the city. So, if you came out here and you say we didn't put a gas station there 1,000 feet, you couldn't meet that distance. There are houses within 1,000 feet of that intersection. And there is a PD. If I had included the PD, this is just for the ones that are already approved, they're under construction or under review. If you included the PD, everything is going to be covered. Yeah. If you include the PD. For example, there is a PD right here with the medium size approach that is already approved, right there. That is, somewhat under review at this intersection. In this southern area, this is a Bridgeford Road. We have Bridgetown down in this area. And a lot of that area is undeveloped inside the city. Yeah. It's undeveloped. I don't think anybody's going to go out there and put a truck stop. There are no, there's no traffic light out there. So that is not something that I think is a cause for concern. This area in the northeast State Line Road going towards South Haven, you know, we may want to think about if it comes to that in the future as we are working on phase 2 of updating the general citywide zoning map. There may be need to create a neighborhood commercial node in this area. It doesn't appear there is any. Because sometimes in writing these regulations, it's very important to look at the lay of the land of the city. You know, what do I have in my city? What do I not have? Where are there needs? And write regulations that can respond to those particular needs. And when you look at this map, this particular area certainly needs a commercial node. There is need for the commercial node over here. The Center Hill area we just annexed, you know, that was recently annexed into the city. There is need for the commercial node there. There is some commercial node area in the county, you know, not very far, somewhere around, I think in this area. There is a gas station there already, somewhere around here. So those opportunities exist.
Yeah.
But for 1,000 feet for truck stop, I don't think it would negatively affect the city.
Yeah, and I think with reducing
or
the,
residential.
reducing the number of pumps in the C1 to, what'd you say, 6?
6.
6, that reduces that benzene, you know,
Concentration.
and I think that there's a give and take. If we drop that down to 6, I think 200 is reasonable. Yeah.
So is it the case that we drop, for C1, we drop down to 6, and then increase truck stop to 1,000? Is that what the recommendation is? Is that a directive to?
I would agree with Commissioner Singh on the 1,000 feet on the truck stop, and I'm in agreement with the 6 on C. What was it? C1. Yeah.
Okay.
Once again, this is just a recommendation to you. We're not voting on it.
No, you're not voting. This is just
Okay.
for us to go and rewrite what we have,
That's
and then
good.
bring it to you to review and then vote at that time,
Okay.
next month.
Right. Before we let the public make any comments, do y'all have any other questions?
I have one more random question. Does any of our non-conforming stipulations have any, you know, unintended consequences that would result in, you know, a gas station not doing a future repair? Let's say somebody finds a way to capture benzene, but you need to install this equipment, and you've got to put the building behind the facility, and it then puts them into a non-conforming situation where they say, well, rather than do that, make that, because it's 200 feet from the, not just the canopy, but I think it's at the building.
Where we measure it, whichever is closest to that
Yeah.
residential property line.
So is anything, something is currently non-conforming, all right, legally non-conforming, and in order to, you know, something comes along, because we don't know what the future looks like, but something comes along and says if you extend, you know, the canopy another 12 feet, it helps reduce benzene from flying away, but that puts them in a non-conforming situation. Is anything in our non-conforming policies put us in a position where somebody would rather walk away from their gas station than do the repair, or put us in a situation where somebody can't do a future repair that helps us with health and safety or security or anything like that?
Repairs are generally permitted in the zoning ordinance. They are, you know, if, let's say somebody is driving out there now, if you adopt these rules, and somebody is driving and hits the canopy of a gas station, for example, and the gas station owner wants to go in and repair, yes, they are free to repair.
Up to
Repair.
50%, yeah.
Repair, renovation, all of that is, you know, changing the colors, all of that is permitted. It's a different scenario when you have, let's say, the building burns down,
Mhm.
and you have that 1 year. Because there is always, and this is 1 year of no activity. You know, like if 6 months passes and you go in and you repair a portion of it, the clock starts all over. So it's 6 months of no activity.
Mm-hmm.
That is when everything is, your grandfather privileges are lost. 1 year of no activity, sorry, not 6 months. 12, the rule says 12 consecutive months of you just abandoning that site, if I can put it that way. Right now in the city, I don't see any of gas stations that has that problem right now. And adopting these regulations, I don't quickly foresee that kind of a scenario where we will say, no, you cannot repair a gas station site because you have these new rules. No.
Mm-hmm.
Repair, it is okay. If you have a situation where it burns down, you know, and then you just leave the site, you don't touch it for 1 year, nothing happens. And then you come back and say, I want to rebuild from the ground up. That's when you will say, okay, you can rebuild from ground up, but you have to follow these rules. So if the property owner says, well, for me to rebuild, I have to put this canopy on the side or on the rear, per these rules. If I put it on the side, then I'm next to a single family home, or I don't meet a 200 feet requirement. If I put it on the rear, I don't meet this 200 feet requirement. What do you do? That's where the BZA comes in terms of that waiver that we're talking about. You will still go to the BZA to get a conditional use permit, but the BZA will deal with that waiver requirement at that time. Mm-hmm. And the BZA can waive it subject to other provisions. For example, the BZA may say, along the property line, your side property line will require you to plant these types of evergreen trees that grow faster and taller and create a canopy that traps, you know, any of the stuff that is dangerous to human health. Mm-hmm. So those are some of those requirements which administratively staff cannot impose on a project, but the BZA in the approval of a conditional use permit has the powers to do so.
I think also when it comes to tanks and storage tanks and gas pumps, what we're doing here has a lot of overlap, especially with abandoned sites. We have a lot of overlap with the MDEQ, Department of Environmental Quality from the state. If your site is inactive for, I mean, I don't know exactly, I forgot the numbers, but I think it's like 90 days or something like that, that you don't receive fuel delivery, they have stipulations that, hey, you have to do this, this, and this to mitigate your damages and stuff like that. So I think a lot of that does overlap with a lot of the things that they already tell us to do. I just remember one last thing, the brick on the canopy poles. We have in here for just to limit it to just 8 feet up. I think pretty much almost every other municipality that I've seen, they require it to go all the way up.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And most,
Yep. I've had to go back plenty of times and, and add a lot more brick than I was initially intending.
Trying to make it easier.
what does the planning commission want me to do? Do you want it to go up entirely, or do you want it to be 8 feet? I think that 8 feet element, we have these requirements in the city generally that we don't permit if it's below 8 feet. That's how that kind of came in. But if you really look at it, who builds columns for gas stations using IFIS?
MAPCO did.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, Marco does. So
they did,
that might have been intended to prohibit that situation. Maybe the best way to just do it is to say the entire column just needs to be, you know,
Masonry, some sort.
masonry
What's the facade requirement of the building? Is that in line with the facade requirements of the building?
The facade requirements are controlled by the design review ordinance for all commercial and basically multi-family developments in the city. So there is no requirement here that the convenience store building in a gas station must be brick or must be all stones, If it's in a plant development, usually the board imposes those architectural elements in the project text. But in conventional zoning districts, they are controlled generally by the design review ordinance.
So we're putting a requirement that the only brick or natural stone on that in that gas station could be these piers.
No, it's on the buildings too.
But in a planned development, you said that it's not a requirement to have,
Most often, in almost every planned development I can think of in this city.
Like-
In commercial areas, you have a requirement of 75% brick, minimum 75% brick on all facades. And then, from the design review ordinance, the city does not permit AFEs below 8 feet, basically.
okay.
No AFEs. And when you look at the ones we have in the city, most gas station developers, they use brick. Most. In few cases, they may use, let me not say brick, in almost all cases, 95%, I would say. On my head, I can't think of one that is not like that. It's some masonry material. There is some masonry material. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more comments? I guess.
We can eliminate that to just say, the columns have to match the material that used in the principal structure itself.
Yeah, if we're not allowing AFEs under 8 feet, and the 8 feet on the piers would match the building, I don't wanna require, somebody to do a 12, 16-foot brick if it doesn't match their building.
Yes. So the best way to do it, to make it match, is just to say the columns should match the material you use on the principal structure.
Okay, are we okay with that? Open for any public comments if you wish to come forward and, state your name, address, and make any comments you wish.
Norman Haji. I think this topic need more discussion with the public. It will reflect in a lot of people, not just the C-store developers. A lot of people buying these corners and they thinking they invest in there. I think need to be a lot of people to show and discussion that, number one. Number two, this case with this regulation would lead to restriction that for the gas station, the truck stop, need to be handled on stages. Like future project, you're okay with it. Project under reviewing, project with the permits. So it's a neat time. It's gonna cause a lot of problems. Maybe today it's not showing a lot of people, but I promise you, tomorrow you're gonna see a lot of people gonna come and say, oh, we don't hear about that. We didn't see it, we don't agree it. That's my position. I'm in the convenience store business. I think in the analysis map, we seen, I think 16 sites under review and construction, whatever, on Olive Branch. 16 sites, it's not much on large city like Olive Branch. So I think this is topic, it's a serious matter, need to be more handles, more publics. It cannot be cooked fast. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to make any comments? If not, then our public discussion is closed. Now, we will have the public hearing at the next meeting, which is November. Do you have the date? November 12th? November 12th, we'll have the public hearing. Okay. Any other business? I guess I'm looking for, yes, ma'am.
I have one. I'm working on updating the deadline dates and meeting dates for all of next year. So I have those calendars able to be printed by the end of this year. November 11th is when our November meeting for next year would be set for. But the city is closed on Veterans Day. So I don't know what the normal term is. I'm thinking just move it to that following day, that Wednesday. If y'all are fine with that, because I can't push it to the next week, because we're all doing the same time. So if y'all are fine with that, I'm fine with that. I just
Okay.
wanted to check with y'all first.
Everybody okay with it?
Everybody cool?
We're
All right,
good.
it'll be that Wednesday then.
20,
Thank y'all.
we're looking at 2025 now, huh? Okay. All righty. Anybody else? Yes, we need a motion to adjourn then.
I make a motion motion to adjourn.
All right, Ms. Singer made the motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Jones. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are officially adjourned.